Once upon a time, when the name of Eric Hunter echoed across the world like a victorious trumpet, a noble and kind-hearted king ruled over the ancient land of China. This king, whom we shall call King Arthur, had but one child, a daughter, the radiant and fearless Princess Eva. Eva was not only breathtakingly beautiful, but also sharp-witted and courageous. King Arthur and Queen Eleanor loved her dearly. Every corridor of the palace sparkled with the glow of Eva's smile. But then one day, fate took a cruel turn, and Eva's life changed forever. One sunny afternoon, as Princess Eva sat upon the palace rooftop, gently combing her golden hair, a strange breeze whispered through the skies. It was Raven, the sole son of the mighty emperor of genies. Powerful, proud, and dangerously arrogant, Raven soared through the clouds like a shadow wrapped in fire. But the moment his eyes fell upon Eva, his heart skipped a beat. Smitten by her beauty, he wasted no time. With a flick of his magic, Raven transformed himself into a charming, noble prince and descended gracefully onto the palace rooftop. Eva, startled by the sudden appearance of a stranger, stood up in alarm, her eyes sharp, her voice even sharper. "Who are you, and how dare you land here?" Her tone, fierce and commanding. For Eva knew no ordinary man could descend from the sky. Raven, suppressing his irritation, took a slow breath and replied, "I am Raven, son of the Emperor of Genies. Fear not, Eva." His voice was soft, almost tender, but a strange glint in his eyes made her tremble. "Why are you here?" Eva asked, her voice now laced with fear. Raven smiled, ever so slightly, and said, "I love you, Eva. I wish to marry you. Come with me." But Eva's fear turned to fury. "Nonsense," she snapped. "I will never marry a genie. Leave at once." Her defiance ignited Raven's wrath. In a flash, he shed his human disguise, revealing his true form. A terrifying, towering genie, his eyes blazing like fire. Before Eva could even scream, he seized her in his powerful, monstrous grip. She cried out, her voice tearing through the sky, but her screams echoed uselessly in the empty air. Palace guards and royal courtiers rushed to the rooftop, hearing her cries. But Raven was already soaring high above the palace, Eva clenched in his mighty hands. Arrows flew, but none could reach him. Raven laughed mockingly. "Ha ha ha! I am Raven, son of the Emperor of Genies. You mortals can do nothing to stop me. Eva will be mine." And with that, he vanished into the sky, taking Princess Eva with him. Panic erupted in the royal palace. King Arthur rushed out from his court, his heart shattered. Queen Eleanor wept uncontrollably, her cries echoing through the marble halls like thunder in a storm. In desperation, the king summoned every sorcerer, every mystic, every enchanter in the land. "Find her," he ordered. "Bring back my daughter. Bring back Eva." But no spell, no ritual, no sacred chant could trace her presence or reveal Raven's hidden lair. The kingdom's greatest magicians failed, and the royal family sank into hopeless despair. In his grief, King Arthur gathered his wisest advisors, and soon a royal proclamation echoed across the land. "Whoever finds Princess Eva and frees her from Raven's clutches shall marry her and inherit half my kingdom." Warriors, adventurers, and wanderers set out with courage blazing in their hearts, but none returned. A month passed, and hope slowly faded. Meanwhile, far from the palace, in a modest village tucked between hills and dust, lived Eric Hunter, a legendary trickster and reluctant hero. But even legends have household troubles. "You always waste money, Eric," shouted his wife Mary. "How will we run the house?" Eric, rolling his eyes, muttered, "Here we go again." Their quarrel was suddenly interrupted by a knock at the door. Eric raised an eyebrow, signaled Mary to retreat to the bedroom, and opened the door. Standing there was a Chinese royal messenger. "Is this the home of Eric Hunter?" the messenger asked, mispronouncing it as Eric Hende. There was silence. Then, in a flash, Eric grabbed the poor messenger by the collar. "How dare you butcher my name, you scoundrel!" he growled, eyes blazing with fury. The messenger stammered, "Forgive me, sir. I must have made a mistake. The Emperor of China sent me to you." Eric paused, released his grip, and narrowed his eyes. "What emperor?" he demanded. "Speak plainly." The messenger, trembling, handed him a sealed envelope. "This is a message from our emperor. Please read it." Eric took the letter, tore the seal open, and began to read, silently, as the wind whispered through the doorway. Eric unfolded the letter and began to read. The parchment carried the seal of the Emperor of China. "To the renowned Eric Hunter, your fame as a champion of the oppressed, an enemy of genies, ghosts, and sorcerers, and an unmatched hero, has reached us. A month ago, my daughter, Princess Eva, was abducted by Raven, son of the Emperor of Genies. Despite our every effort, we have found no trace of her. In despair, I now beseech your help. Free Eva from Raven's clutches. I shall be forever grateful, and will grant any reward you desire. For now, I send 1,000 dinars for your journey. I pray you will act swiftly. The Emperor of China." Eric looked at the messenger, his eyes firm, his voice unwavering. "Tell your emperor that I shall set out tomorrow to find Princess Eva. By God's grace, I will free her from Raven and bring her home. Ask him to be patient, for God is with those who persevere." The messenger smirked. "One thing is clear, Eric. You're as stingy as they say. You didn't even offer me a glass of water." With that, he mounted his horse and rode off into the distance. Eric stood still, quietly pondering his reputation. Meanwhile, high above the mountains of Persia, Raven made a grave mistake. As he flew with Eva in his grasp, she suddenly transformed into a flower. It slipped through his fingers and fell toward the earth. Stunned, Raven dove after it, but a fiery halo burst around the flower, its flames pushing him back with force. The flower drifted gently downward, landing in the courtyard of a grand, forgotten palace. Standing there, waiting, was an ugly old man with eyes like smoke. But this was no ordinary man. It was Kyle, the sorcerer, the magical ruler of those ancient lands. Kyle picked up the flower and slipped it calmly into his pocket, unharmed by the roaring flames. Just then, Raven landed with a thunderous crash, his rage burning like a storm. "Return the princess, old man," he roared, voice echoing through the mountains. Kyle smirked. "I know who you are, Raven, son of the Emperor of Genies, but I am Kyle, the sorcerer king of this realm. 360 sorcerers serve me. Hand over the princess? Never." And raged. Raven lunged at him, claws outstretched, but Kyle calmly chanted an ancient spell and blew at the charging genie. In an instant, Raven's body began to shrink, smaller and smaller, until he collapsed into a tiny, helpless form. Kyle raised his hand, summoned a rat from the shadows, and with a flick of magic, caged the shrunken genie, then hung the tiny prison from a tree branch in the courtyard below. Kyle entered a grand chamber within his palace, its walls glowing with ancient runes. At the center, a silver bed stood. He gently placed the flower upon it, recited a strange and ancient spell, and blew, softly. In an instant, the flower vanished, and Princess Eva appeared in its place, lying unconscious. Kyle stepped forward, picked up a jug of water from a nearby table, and sprinkled it across her face. Slowly, Eva's eyelids fluttered. She opened her eyes. only to find Kyle leering down at her with a smile that sent chills through her spine. Meanwhile, back in China, Eric Hunter was devising a plan. Knowing that the Genie realm was hidden from mortal sight, he decided to travel to the legendary land of Wonderland, where whispers of sorcerers and genies still lived. Eric dipped his fingers into a vial of magical oil, and with a quick chant, transformed himself into a stunning bride, draped in a shimmering gown that sparkled like the stars. His reflection shimmered, and with a cheeky grin, he began his journey. At the border of Wonderland sat a peculiar old wizard, Casey the Wiz, laughing and chatting with his guards, completely unaware of the bride approaching on foot. Casey the Wiz spotted the approaching bride and instantly was captivated. "Oh, beautiful bride, who are you, and how did you come here?" he asked, voice full of wonder. Eric, in a shy, delicate feminine voice, replied, "I'm too embarrassed to speak in front of others. Let's talk privately." Casey's eyes lit up, and with excitement bubbling in his bones, he eagerly led the bride behind a nearby rock. There, Eric began to spin his tale. "I am a princess from the distant land of starlight. I fled a forced marriage to an ugly, horrible man. I've come to marry you, Casey. Accept me or kill me." His eyes widened, and for the first time in decades, Casey the Wiz was speechless. Casey, overjoyed, threw his arms into the air and shouted, "I'll make you my bride." Then, with twinkling eyes, he added, "My palace is nearby. Come, I'll take you there, like a queen." He began to chant a spell, and with a mighty stamp on the ground, the earth trembled, the wind howled, and from the sky descended a massive dragon with wings that shimmered like 1,000 stars. Eric, staying in character, let out a delicate gasp and climbed onto the dragon behind Casey. With a mighty flap of its wings, the dragon soared into the air, cutting through the clouds, carrying the pair toward Casey's palace. The wind rushed by, but Eric's mind raced faster. Casey the Wiz's palace stood tall atop a towering mountain in Wonderland, surrounded by swirling mists and shimmering magical lights that danced across the sky like living stars. Eric Hunter, still disguised as a radiant bride, sat gracefully upon the back of the dragon as it landed on the palace terrace with a thundering whoosh. They stepped inside, and Casey, overflowing with joy, led his bride into a grand chamber, its walls covered with enchanted tapestries and peculiar statues that whispered when no one looked. Clapping his hands twice, Casey called out, "Bring food, and listen carefully. This is my bride, your new mistress. Obey her, every command." A stunned servant bowed and hurried away. Eric held back a smirk. Eric seized the moment, fluttered his eyelashes just a little, and leaned forward sweetly. "Say, Casey, I've heard you command genies. Is that true?" Casey puffed out his chest with pride, like a rooster in a wizard's robe. "Indeed, I have several genies under my control," he boasted, swirling his beard with flair. Eric gasped softly. "Wow, so where does the Emperor of Genies live? Do they have their own realm?" Casey, loving every second of this attention, smirked and prepared to show off even more. Casey smiled smugly and waved his hand dismissively. "Genies roam the world, but I can find out where their emperor resides with just a simple spell." He began to mutter, an ancient incantation under his breath, strange words that shimmered in the air. Then, he blew toward the ceiling. Suddenly, a thick cloud of smoke billowed downward, swirling, hissing, gathering on the floor like living fog. From within the smoke rose a terrifying genie, his skin dark as ash, his eyes glowing like burning embers. The chamber fell silent. The genie bowed low, and in a deep, echoing voice, said, "What is your command, my master?" Casey raised his hand and declared, "Where does the Emperor of Genies dwell?" The genie, eyes flickering like wildfire, lowered his gaze and replied, "In the northern mountains of Fairyland, my master." A hush fell over the chamber. Then, Eric, still veiled in his radiant bride's disguise, softly stepped forward. "Casey, my dear, dear friend, I just remembered something terrible." His voice trembled with perfectly feigned emotion. "My beloved friend, Princess Eva, was taken by the Emperor's son, Raven the Genie. Could you please ask this genie where she is and how she fares?" Casey, moved by his bride's concern, turned once again to his servant of smoke and fire. Casey turned to the genie and barked, "Tell us, where is Princess Eva now?" The genie lowered his flaming gaze and spoke with grim solemnity. "Princess Eva is not with Raven. She's imprisoned by Kyle the sorcerer, and Raven himself is Kyle's captive." A thunderous silence filled the chamber. Eric, caught off guard, blurted out, voice cracking slightly, "How did this happen?" The genie said nothing until Casey's voice echoed like a whip crack. "Answer the bride's question." The genie flinched, then bowed his head and replied, "Kyle the sorcerer desired Princess Eva. He stole her from Raven by force. Now he plans to marry her, but Eva refuses." Eric leaned in, voice soft, yet sharp with purpose. "Where does Kyle the sorcerer live?" The genie, eyes glowing like dying stars, replied in a low, rumbling tone, 1,000 leagues from here, in the mountainous region of Greece. His palace lies hidden there, guarded by 360 sorcerers." Eric nodded, asking no more. A silence lingered, heavy and final. Then, without a word, Casey raised his hand and blew. The genie withered into smoke, spiraling upward, and vanished into the shadows of the ceiling. Just then, the servant arrived, carrying a lavish feast fit for kings and madmen. As they dined, Eric leaned toward Casey with a sweet smile and asked softly, "How much do you love me?" Casey chuckled, stuffing grapes into his mouth, and replied with gleaming eyes, "More than you can imagine, my bride. Why do you ask?" Eric placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Then, I want you to free my friend Eva from Kyle the sorcerer's clutches." The color drained from Casey's face. His smile vanished. He swallowed hard, then stammered, My dear, that's beyond my power. Kyle is too strong, and he has the full support of Farid the genie. I can't challenge him." Silence fell. Eric said nothing, but his eyes said everything. Eric smiled gently, his eyes thoughtful. "All right," he said, rising from his seat. "Let's take a walk in the courtyard to digest our meal." Casey, oblivious to the plan unfolding, grinned and followed. The moon hung high above, bathing the courtyard in a silver glow. Eric paused and asked with playful curiosity, "Casey, can you conjure a flying horse?" Casey threw back his head and laughed loudly. "That's child's play," he boomed. He clapped his hands, chanted a brief incantation, then blew forcefully at the ground. In an instant, the earth shimmered, and from a swirl of stardust and wind rose a dazzling white horse with wings of silver that glimmered in the moonlight like blades of light. Eric reached into his magical satchel and pulled out a tiny shimmering sweet. With a wide smile, he said, "You're truly a great sorcerer, Casey. Have this sweet to celebrate your brilliance." Casey, grinning ear to ear, popped the treat into his mouth, utterly unaware that it was laced with a sedative brewed in the darkest jungles of Aloria. Within seconds, his vision blurred. His legs wobbled. He blinked, and then collapsed like a sack of spells. Eric, with practiced calm, dragged the sorcerer's limp body back to his chamber. There, he opened a tiny vial from his satchel, filled with a shimmering, golden magical oil. He smeared it over his face and hands, and as the oil soaked into his skin, his features shifted, twisted, reshaped, until Eric Hunter looked exactly like Casey the Wiz. Now, the real game would begin. In silence, he stepped into the halls of the palace as the master himself and began his search. In one of the chambers, Eric found what many dream of: chests brimming with gold and jewels, gleaming rubies, sapphire-studded goblets, and coins that shone like captured starlight. With a mischievous grin, he stuffed handfuls of treasure into his magical satchel, and then heaved an entire heavy chest onto his shoulder. Back in Casey's chamber, he laid the chest open and turned to the unconscious sorcerer. "You've been most helpful," Eric smirked. He pulled out a slender enchanted needle and inserted it into Casey's tongue to keep him deep in magical slumber. Then he bound his hands and feet, folded the dazed wizard like laundry, and locked him inside the treasure chest. Whistling, Eric dragged the chest outside, tied it to the back of the magnificent flying horse, mounted the beast, and pointed to the sky, to Kyle the sorcerer's realm. The horse neighed, wings burst wide, and with a single powerful leap, it soared into the sky, carrying gold, secrets, and a snoring sorcerer. As Eric, still disguised as Casey, crossed the shimmering border of Wonderland, the guards straightened, eyes wide in awe. But none dared question him, for in their eyes, he was Casey the Wiz. Hours later, the magical steed descended into a breathtaking region of mountains and mists. 400 palaces sparkled across the land, some floating, some hidden in cliffs, and one that stood like a king among mortals. Its towering minaret pierced the clouds, casting a shadow across the valley. Below it bustled a vibrant town, filled with enchanters, magical merchants, and cloaked beings with glowing eyes. The flying horse landed gently in the town square. Curious onlookers gathered, murmuring in wonder. Then, from the crowd, a tall sorcerer stepped forward, his robes laced with fire. "Aha!" he cried. "My dear friend Casey has arrived." Eric narrowed his eyes. This must be one of Casey's friends. He dismounted smoothly, adjusting his robes with quiet precision. The sorcerer approached, a tall man with flowing robes and an eager smile. "Tell me, Casey," the sorcerer beamed, "what brings you here? It's been ages." Eric forced a laugh, light, natural, but hollow underneath. "Just missed you, old friend," he replied, clapping Randy on the shoulder. Randy tilted his head. "Strange, I almost didn't recognize you." For a split second, Eric's heart skipped, but he chuckled, waving it off. "Come on, Randy, let's head to your place. I'll explain everything." And together, the two sorcerers, one real, one masked, walked into the depths of the magical city. Randy led Eric through the marble halls of his palace, walls shimmering with enchantments, chandeliers breathing soft firelight. In a lavish sitting room, he motioned toward a velvet couch. "Sit, now tell me, what's the trouble?" Eric exhaled a deep, practiced sigh. With eyes downcast and voice heavy, he said, "Randy, our ruler, Kyle the sorcerer, has imprisoned my fiancée, Princess Eva. I'm powerless against him." Randy's face darkened. "Kyle's a tyrant," he muttered. "But he's backed by Farid the Genie. My advice?" He leaned closer, voice low. "Complain to Farid. If anyone can overrule Kyle, it's the Genie King himself." Silence fell, and Eric began to think. Eric narrowed his eyes. This was the moment. Clutching his stomach, he let out a dramatic groan. "Oh, My stomach, he cried. Randy, quick, fetch some medicine. Randy jumped to his feet, panicked, loyal, and utterly unaware. The moment he dashed out, Eric sat up straight, like a wolf removing a sheep's mask. Swiftly, he pulled a tiny glass vial from his satchel, shimmering sleeping powder. With the ease of a practiced hand, he sprinkled it onto Randy's steaming plate and stirred. Just in time, Randy returned, breathless. What, you're better already? Eric laughed, clapping his hands dramatically. The moment I mentioned medicine, the pain vanished. Randy blinked, puzzled, but too hungry to question it. He picked up his spoon, took one bite, then a second, and before the third, slumped over, his head hitting the table with a soft, final thud. Eric locked the chamber door behind him, the click echoing like a drum of decision. From his satchel, he took out the last few drops of magical oil and gently applied it to his face, neck, and hands. Slowly, his features twisted and morphed until Randy the Wiz stood before the mirror. Just then, a puff of smoke emerged near the ceiling. From it descended a small, enchanted puppet, its glowing eyes scanning the room, sent to wake the real Randy. But Eric was faster. With one swift motion, he drew his gleaming sword and sliced the puppet clean in half. Sparks flew. The puppet collapsed, never uttering a word. Eric moved fast. Room by room, he looted Randy's palace, gathering jewels, scrolls, gold, and enchanted rings. Back in the courtyard, he untied the chest from the horse's back, placed it near the sleeping Randy, and dragged Casey's limp form beside it. A pile of snoring sorcerers. No one would know what had happened. And then, with the moonlight as his witness, Eric slipped silently through the side gate, his eyes locked on the towering minaret in the distance. Kyle's palace. The final stage had begun. As Eric moved swiftly through the moonlit path, the towering minaret of Kyle's palace now looming closer. A cracked voice pierced the silence. Hey! Randy, listen to me! Eric froze. From the shadows emerged an old woman, hunched over, wrapped in layers of faded silk. With a practiced grin, Eric mimicked Randy's voice perfectly. What's up, Auntie? He said, his tone casual. The old woman narrowed her eyes. Come with me. It's urgent. Eric hesitated. First tell me, what's the matter? She stepped closer, her eyes sharp beneath the wrinkles. Someone stole from my treasury. I want you to count the loss for me. A bead of sweat rolled down Eric's neck. Could this be a trap? Or just another test in this world of sorcery? Eric's eyes sparkled. The mention of treasure always did that. But he masked his excitement, shrugging coolly. All right, Auntie, I'm coming. The old woman turned, her cane clicking softly on the stone path as she led him through winding alleys until they reached a small, curved palace, ancient and laced with cobwebs. Sheba the witch, though Eric didn't know that yet. Inside, she motioned him to sit. The room flickered with violet fire. Once upon a time, she began, your mother was my friend. Did you know that? Eric blinked. No, she never mentioned it. The witch smiled. A laugh escaped her lips, dry, knowing. Of course she didn't. Suddenly, her eyes flared, the fire turned blue, and her voice cut like a blade. She didn't tell you because you're not Randy. You are Eric Hunter. The room went silent, and Eric's fingers twitched toward his satchel. Eric jumped, his hand darting toward his satchel. Too late. Sheba's voice grew sharp. Don't play dumb, Eric. I know everything. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing with menace. Casey is my nephew. I went to Wonderland to visit him. And what did I find? A ransacked palace and a mysterious chest being dragged across borders. Enough. She raised her hands. Enough lies. Then she chanted a spell, ancient and guttural, and blew toward Eric. A swirl of silver mist snapped into place around him, forming a glowing cage of light and runes. Eric tried to move, but couldn't. Sheba smirked. "I'm off to Randy's palace." Her fingers tapped the air, forming a small door of light. She turned her head back one last time, and with a wicked grin she added, "When I return, I'll arrange your wedding." Cackle. Exit. Silence. And Eric? Stuck. Caged. Engaged? Eric smirked behind the glowing bars. "My wedding? With you?" Sheba's face twisted with rage. She spat in his face and stormed out, her cloak trailing like smoke. Eric wiped his cheek, then reached into his satchel. A soft shimmer, and he pulled out his invisibility cloak. One smooth motion, and he vanished. Moments later, the door creaked open. Sheba returned, only to freeze. The cage was still there, but empty. "What?" Her voice cracked like lightning. She chanted a reversal spell. Her hands trembling. The cage vanished, but so had Eric. Under the bed, he waited, silent, still, focused. Sheba, frustrated, summoned a puppet. "Where is Eric?" she barked. The puppet twitched, about to speak, but suddenly, Eric leapt from under the bed, his sword flashing like a streak of lightning. Swoosh! One clean strike. Sheba's eyes widened, then dimmed. Her head dropped, and her body crumpled to the floor. The puppet flickered and vanished in a puff of smoke. Eric stood tall, sword in hand, alone again, but now free. Far from Sheba's ruined palace, in a courtyard burning with rage, Casey and Randy faced off. Traitor, liar, their voices echoed like thunder. Casey hurled a roaring fireball. Randy twisted his hands, conjuring a venomous mist. Spells clashed midair. The shockwave rocked the stone walls. Neither held back. Each believed the other had betrayed him. They fought like enemies until both collapsed, writhing, mortally wounded. Their final curses lost in the wind. Meanwhile, in the shadows beyond, a silent figure slipped through a crack in the palace gate. Eric Hunter, now dressed in a humble servant's robes, kept his eyes down and his steps light. He carried nothing but a broom and a blade hidden beneath it. His destination, Kyle's palace, where far above the marble towers, behind enchanted walls and monstrous guards, Princess Eva waited in chains, and Raven the Genie remained trapped in magic. The final chapter was about to begin. In the shadow of Greece's jagged mountains, where clouds kissed the peaks, stood a palace like no other, Kyle the Sorcerer's fortress. Its towering minaret shimmered in the moonlight like a dagger raised to the sky. Through the back gates, past guards too bored to notice, crept a humble servant. Or so he appeared. For beneath that worn robe and behind that lowered gaze, beat the heart of a legend. Eric Hunter, trickster, hero, master of disguise. His mind was clear. Rescue Eva. Free Raven if possible. And if fate allows, bring Kyle to his knees. But this would not be easy. Kyle was no mere tyrant. 360 sorcerers answered his call. And behind him stood Farid the Genie, a being of unspeakable power. Still, Eric's satchel swelled with enchanted tools, potions, powders, cloaks, and charms. But more dangerous than any spell was his mind. Sharp, bold, unpredictable. And as the palace loomed ahead, with guards marching its silver steps, Eric whispered to himself, "Let the game begin." At the palace gates, guards stood tall, their eyes scanning shadows. But Eric, in the garb of a servant, slipped by like a whisper in the wind. Inside, the grand hall opened before him, a spectacle of enchanted mirrors that shimmered with moving images, and walls laced with crystal veins, glowing with ancient magic. Eric walked silently, his gaze fixed, his steps rehearsed. Then, through a half-open chamber door, something caught his eye. A golden cage, floating midair, glowing with runes. And inside it, not a princess, but a fox. Its fur shimmered like moonlight, its eyes wide, afraid, yet familiar. Eric's breath caught, his fists clenched. "Eva," he whispered. Kyle had done this. He had twisted her form, robbed her voice, caged her soul. Rage surged in Eric's chest, but he didn't move. Because rage alone doesn't win wars. Patience does. Eric lowered his head and vanished into the corridor once more, watching, waiting, plotting. In that same shimmering chamber, tucked on a polished marble table, sat a glass bottle. Inside it, twisted and compressed, was a figure of shadow and smoke, Raven the Genie. Eric crept closer, silent as breath. He knelt beside the golden cage. "Eva, don't be afraid," he whispered. "I'm Eric Hunter, and I've come to save you." The fox lifted her head. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with recognition. Slowly, she turned toward the bottle. With one swift paw, she nudged it off the edge. Crash! The glass shattered. A storm of smoke erupted from the floor. It twisted, roared, and formed into a towering figure, Raven. His chains dissolved, his arms spread wide. "Eva, thank you," he gasped. But before he could say more, Eric raised a finger. A single gesture. Silence. The battle hadn't begun yet, but the alliance had. With the fox curled in his arms, Eric whispered, "You'll be safe here, Eva." He tucked her gently into his magical satchel, sealing her in soft enchantments. Then, creak, a servant stepped into the room. Eric turned calmly, his hands already reaching into his bag. "Hey," he said, with a friendly smile. "Your eyes look red. Let me apply some soothing kohl." The servant blinked. "Oh, sure." A single stroke under each eye, a whisper of enchantment, and the servant's eyes rolled back. Thud. He collapsed like a sack of grain. Eric moved fast. He dabbed his magical oil, and in moments, he wore the servant's face. He changed clothes swiftly and dragged the body under the bed. He took a breath, turned toward the door, and froze. It burst open. Kyle, the sorcerer. His cloak billowed behind him, his eyes glowing with fury. "What's going on in here?" His voice cracked like thunder. Eric lowered his gaze, heart pounding beneath the servant's robes. Now, the real test began. Kyle's boots struck the floor like hammer blows. His cloak swirled, his eyes burning with rage. He roared, "What's this? Where are Eva and Raven?" His gaze swept the room, landing on the shattered glass, the empty cage, the trembling servant. Eric, in disguise. His mind raced. He lowered his eyes and stammered, "Master, I don't know. I just came in, and the room was empty. Maybe Farid the genie took them." Silence. Kyle narrowed his eyes. His voice dropped, cold and lethal. "Why so quiet? Speak." Eric reached into his pocket, heart pounding like thunder in his chest. He pulled out a handkerchief. "Master, I found this on the table." He held it up. "It smells of Farid's magic." Kyle leaned forward, snatched it, sniffed. His nostrils flared. He turned away for a second. But that second was all Eric needed to breathe again. Kyle snatched the cloth, brought it to his nose, and sniffed. A moment of silence, then a wobble. His eyes rolled, his knees gave out. Thud. The mighty sorcerer collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Eric stepped forward, calm but quick. He propped Kyle up against a wall, wiped his hands clean, and slipped the enchanted handkerchief back into his pocket. He reached for his magical oil. But then, slam, the door flew open. A tall shadow filled the frame. Turner the Wiz. Kyle's chief minister. His eyes widened. Two Kyles, one standing, one slumped. "Sorcery," he gasped, and began chanting. Eric didn't wait. He dove into his satchel, pulled out a fistful of chili powder, and flung it straight into Turner's face. "Arg!" Turner howled. His spell shattered midair. He clutched his burning eyes, stumbling back, blinded. Eric didn't smile. He moved, because every second now counted. Turner shrieked, stumbling back, clawing at his burning eyes. Eric didn't waste a breath. He bolted from the chamber, slammed the door shut, and twisted the lock. His feet pounded through the palace halls, past enchanted fountains, past sleeping guards, past danger. He burst out the grand gate into the wild, whispering forest. Only then did he stop, gasping, sweating, alive. He reached into his satchel, pulled out the last drops of magical oil, and whispered, "Let's become someone unforgettable." Moments later, a stunning bride stepped onto the dusty road. Her gown shimmered like moonlight. Her veil fluttered with mystery. Her name was Chom Chom the Witch. And just as her heels kissed the earth, a patrol approached. Guards of Kyle and Turner. "Halt!" one shouted. "Who are you?" Chom Chom smiled sweetly. "Just a poor bride," she said, "searching for love and running from a sorcerer who smells la." Tears streamed down her face, glittering like diamonds on silk cheeks. Turner halted, puzzled. "Who are you?" he asked. "And why are you crying?" The bride sniffled, then spoke, her voice as soft as honey with a tremble of pain. I can only tell you in private." She looked up with tear-filled eyes. "Please, send these men away." Turner hesitated, then snapped, "Leave us!" The guards marched off, casting curious glances over their shoulders. Turner turned back, a flicker of desire in his eyes. "Now speak, fair lady." She smiled faintly. "Only if you tell me something first." Turner leaned in, intrigued. "Tell me your name and your noble title." Turner straightened up, proudly puffing his chest. "I am Turner the Wiz," he announced, "Minister of the great Kyle the Sorcerer." Chom Chom the Witch lowered her gaze and whispered, "Then you're the one I was looking for." Eric clapped his hands like a delighted child at a festival. "Perfect!" he exclaimed. "I was looking for you, Turner." Turner blinked, confused, curious. "Me?" "Yes, Farid the Genie sent me as your bride." Chom Chom lowered her gaze dramatically. "I was crying because I couldn't find you. But now, thank heavens, here you are." Turner gasped. A spark lit up in his greedy eyes. "Farid sent me? A bride?" Eric nodded sweetly. "Yes, and I've already thanked him for it." She offered a gentle curtsy. "My name is Chom Chom, the witch." She yawned delicately. "Now, please take me home, Turner. I'm exhausted." Turner chuckled. "Oh ho ho, you will be home soon, my dear. My palace awaits." He offered his hand. And thus began a journey of lies, draped in silk and smiles. Turner the Wiz led her through arched halls beneath ceilings of crystal and chandeliers of flame. "Rest now, my bride," he said proudly, puffing his chest like a rooster. "I've work to do. I must catch that scoundrel Eric Hunter. He dared to throw chili powder in my noble eyes." Chom Chom giggled softly. "How terrible," she whispered. "But wait, before you go." She reached into her satchel. Slowly, silently. I brought something from Wonderland. Her fingers revealed a sparkling sweet wrapped in golden foil. For your strength, she purred, and gently pressed it into his mouth. Turner blinked, smiled, chewed, and then his pupils shrank, his knees bent. Thud. The minister of Kyle the sorcerer collapsed like a fallen statue. Chom Chom tilted her head, smiled sweetly. Sweet dreams, darling. Meanwhile, deep within the blackened corridors of Kyle's palace, the sorcerer stirred. His eyes snapped open, his rage uncontainable. "Eva is gone," he hissed. "This reeks of Eric Hunter." He stormed to his cabinet, pulled out a crimson skull, its eye sockets glowing with dark energy. Holding it before him, he chanted ancient words, syllables no mortal dared speak. Then he blew. Smoke burst from the skull's eyes, coiling, twisting, until it formed a terrifying genie of shadows. "What is your command, my master?" Kyle's voice thundered. "Find Eva. Find Eric Hunter. Bring me their location, now." The genie bowed low, its voice like echoing death. "As you wish, my master." It dissolved into smoke, vanishing into the sky. Half an hour later, the shadowy genie returned, its form trembling with dread. "Master," it said softly, "I scoured the entire city, but there's no trace of Eva. My senses tell me she is still here, hidden in a place I cannot reach." Silence. Then Kyle exploded. "Useless creature!" He shouted a cursed spell, ancient, deadly. Flames erupted around the genie. It screamed once, then turned to ashes. Kyle, panting with fury, grabbed the skull and hurled it against the wall. It shattered. Like glass beneath thunder. "Bring me Turner," he barked. A magical puppet appeared, swirling out of the air like a coiled mist. "Where is Turner?" Kyle growled. The puppet bowed stiffly. "At his palace, master." Kyle marched down the marble path, his cloak flaring like fire behind him. Each step, thunder. "Where is Turner?" he growled. A trembling guard stepped forward. "Master, Turner returned with a bride." Kyle stopped, eyes narrowed. "A what?" "A bride, my lord," the guard repeated. "Chom Chom the witch. She's beautiful and very fond of him." Kyle's jaw clenched. "A bride?" His voice dropped to a whisper, more dangerous than any scream. "I never approved any such union." He turned sharply. "Take me to Turner's palace, now." Kyle kicked open the palace doors, his eyes ablaze, his fury ready to burn the walls down. And there she stood, Chom Chom, her gown torn, her cheeks streaked with tears, her voice trembling yet defiant. "Oh, Kyle," she cried. "Your minister, Turner, was a traitor." Kyle froze. Chom Chom continued. "He kidnapped me, forced me to dress as his bride, and planned to marry me without your permission." She paused, eyes wide. "So I killed him, to save myself. Now, great sorcerer, will you punish me, or make me your bride?" Silence. Then, Kyle burst into laughter. "You are bold. You did well, Chom Chom." He stepped forward, his voice a mix of admiration and desire. "Turner was a traitor. You exposed him, and for that, I shall marry you myself." He extended his hand. "Come, bride of the sorcerer." Kyle raised his arms with pride. "Announce to the city," he roared. "Tomorrow I wed Chom Chom the witch." Trumpets echoed. Guards bowed. The walls seemed to shimmer with excitement. But Chom Chom, Eric in disguise, feigned worry. "But, my lord," he said softly, "how will we pay for the wedding?" Kyle laughed, full of arrogance. "You're so innocent, my dear. I rule this land. My palace holds 10 chambers of treasure." Eric smiled sweetly and reached into his satchel. "Then, let us drink to our fortune." He held out a small crystal vial, a gift from Wonderland, a wine unlike any other. Kyle took it, smirked, and drank deeply. A second passed, then another. Kyle's eyes widened, his limbs went limp, and the sorcerer collapsed, unconscious, at the feet of his bride. As dawn broke over the mountains, two old men trudged toward the palace gates of China. But behind the wrinkles and rags were legends. Eric Hunter and Princess Eva. Eric sprinkled a few drops of magical water. Light shimmered, and Eva became herself once more, dazed but smiling. In the royal court, King Arthur sat in sorrow. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Eva ran in, tears streaming down her face. "Father," she cried, "this old man is Eric Hunter, my savior." The old man bowed, then stood tall. With a shimmer of oil and magic, his true form appeared. Eric Hunter, triumphant. He told his tale of genies and sorcerers, of tricks and escapes, of courage and love. The court fell silent, then erupted in cheers. King Arthur rose from his throne, eyes glistening with gratitude. "Eric Hunter," he said, "you have done what no army could. Name your reward, and it shall be yours." Eric grinned. "My satchel," he said, tapping its side, "is empty. Fill it with treasure." The king gestured. Guards rushed in, pouring gold, silver, diamonds into the bag. But the satchel kept swallowing, and swallowing, and swallowing. The pile grew smaller. "What sorcery is this?" the king exclaimed. Eric laughed. "It's the magic of my satchel, Your Majesty. This is enough, or you'll empty your kingdom." Everyone laughed, even the king. For 2 glorious days, Eric Hunter feasted in China. Musicians played, dancers twirled, and Eric, like a true hero, sat at the center, regaling the court with tales of genies, sorcerers, and enchanted battles. Laughter echoed through the halls. Wine flowed like rivers. On the 3rd day, Eric stood before the king, his satchel heavy with gold, his heart light with joy. "Farewell, Your Majesty," he said. "I leave with riches, but more than that, with your love and your daughter's smile." Trumpets sounded, the gates opened, and Eric rode off into the horizon, his legend shining brighter than ever. Thus ends the tale of Eric Hunter, the trickster, the warrior, the hero, who laughed at danger and always won. And so, Eric Hunter's quest came to an end. Or did it? In the shadows of forgotten lands, a darker force stirs. New magic, new enemies, and Eric's legend is far from over. If you want to witness the next chapter, subscribe now. Hit the bell icon and join us as the adventure continues. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment? And remember, legends don't rest. Neither does Eric Hunter.